Hey everyone, it's Kevin. Welcome back to the channel. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to create these mesh vases drawn entirely with grease pencil in Blender 3D. If you're new to grease pencil, it's an amazing tool in Blender that allows you to draw 2D directly within 3D space. It's extremely versatile and is mostly known for animating in 3D and creating 2D, 3D hybrid artworks. Recently, with the release of Blender 4.3, grease pencil has become even more powerful because it now integrates with geometry nodes. If you don't know, geometry nodes is Blender's procedural system that allows you to build and manipulate just about anything using a node-based workflow. This new integration is so awesome because it opens the door to so many possibilities and has significantly changed the way I work. So recently, if you follow me on social media, you've probably seen I've been experimenting a lot with grease pencil and geometry nodes. It had been a while since my last Blender related video and I've been meaning to dive back into it. In one of these recent experiments, I created these vases for these roses. It's essentially mimicking a screw modifier with a grease pencil stroke as the input, as opposed to, let's say, a curve. But what's great about this is that you have way more control, being able to use grease pencil's editing tools and incorporate additional nodes. You can also convert it into a mesh if you'd like to edit it directly. Now, this setup is just one of the many ways this setup can be useful in your workflow. And it doesn't have to be limited to just vases. It's great for more general modeling cases too. Honestly, it's overwhelming with how much you can do with this combination, so I'm planning on making more videos as I encounter new uses. It's important to note this tutorial will only work with Blender 4.3 and later. That's because first, grease pencil got a complete backend overhaul in this version, and second, this update added compatibility with geometry nodes. Now, if you're new to geometry nodes, don't worry, as this setup will be simple enough to follow along. I'll also have a free project file available for download on my Gumroad. Let's get into it. So here I'm in a new Blender file, Blender 4.3.2. Again, make sure to use 4.3 as this will not work in older versions. Let's delete the cube with X and hit Shift A to bring in a new grease pencil stroke. Now, raising this dope sheet, let's change this window to the geometry node editor by clicking this button in the top left. Select New and rename this to GP Screw Mesh or whatever you'd like. We'll need to convert our strokes into a curve, then turn that curve into a mesh and finally extrude it. So first, let's bring in a grease pencil to curves node, which essentially takes our grease pencil strokes and converts them directly into curves. That's why the original black grease pencil stroke disappears, leaving only the path behind. That path is now a curve. Next, let's bring in a curve to mesh node, which will help give our curve some actual geometry. Now, you'll see we have two inputs here, curve and profile curve. The curve is your main path, and the profile curve defines the shape that gets swept along that path. So to quickly demonstrate, I'll bring in a curve line and curve circle, and then I'll connect this curve mesh to the group output. And by the way, I am using Node Wrangler, which is a helpful free add-on you can download when working with nodes. So if I plug the curve line into the curve input, you'll see a straight vertical path appear. Then when I plug the curve circle into the profile curve input, it creates a circular shape that's swept along that vertical path. Instead of the circle, I want to use grease pencil to form this profile. So when I plug this in and toggle off layers as instances, you'll see it extrudes vertically downward instead of just a single line. Now, instead of the curve line, I'll swap it out for our curve circle. This obviously doesn't look right yet, so we'll need to bring in a transform geometry node and rotate our grease pencil stroke 90 degrees along the X and Y axes, and then you'll see it stands upright. When we plug back our curve to mesh node, we get the desired shape. I'll also lower the radius of the curve circle to 0.1 to better match the original drawn stroke. Now, with this setup, if I select the grease pencil object and go into draw mode, I can quickly sketch different shapes using this screw-like setup. Now, this goes by the origin point of the grease pencil object, so if you'd like to move how the strokes rotate around, you'll need to move the actual object. Unfortunately, the set origin option for grease pencil has been removed as of 4.3 for some reason, and I'm hoping this will be added back in at some point. Going back to making the vase, I'll quickly sketch out a fun shape. To give this some thickness, I'll bring in an extrude mesh node, toggle off individual, and lower the offset to around 0.025. Now, keep in mind that the direction you draw along the z-axis matters. If you draw from bottom to top, the faces might be flipped and look incorrect when extruded. If that happens, just bring in a flip faces node to correct it. And if you want to smooth this out, you can add a subdivision surface node set to levels 2 and a set shade smooth node to give it a nice polished look. But I'll remove those for now. Now let's say instead of a circle, you wanted something square. We can lower the resolution of the circle to 4, and just like that, we have a square shape. The cool thing about this setup is that we can also add grease pencil modifiers like noise or build. Just make sure they're placed before the geometry node setup in the modifier stack. Additionally, you can use grease pencil sculpting tools like grab or smooth to further shape your design. To add a material to this, we can drop in a set material node at the end of our node setup and pick a mesh material of our choice. But if you want even more control, you might prefer to convert this into a mesh. Now, you can't directly apply the modifier to turn it into a mesh, and I think that's because grease pencil objects aren't evaluated the same way as meshes, but there is a workaround. Let's move this to the side for now and bring in a cube. Create a new geometry node setup, and let's bring in that grease pencil stroke object from the View Layers tab. We can also bring in an object info node and then pull it in manually. Plug this geometry output into the group output node, and now we can apply the modifier, turning it into actual geometry. Note that this won't carry over any grease pencil modifiers. Now we can edit specific vertices and use sculpting tools, texture it, or even add shaders. For example, if I color this using color attribute, I can color along all those points individually. And now we have our mesh vases. So in this project file, I have the flower arrangement with this vase containing the geometry node system. So if you select it and go into draw mode, you can create a new one. Also, there's a couple of things in this file I included, but I didn't walk through, like a painterly shader specifically on the flowers and the vase, a world shader that uses a lot of the same elements from that painterly shader, an outline geometry node system, and then some compositing to tie it all together. I may do a walkthrough on some of these other features, but I thought I should call them out so you don't miss them. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I know this was a short one, but I'm hoping to come out with more in the future. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Thanks again, and see you all in the next video.